"I'm just bait," she whispered. The rancher cut the rope and stared in horror. It was Arizona territory, September 1874, when the desert carried more than dust. It carried silence heavy enough to crush the heart. The sun bled red across the horizon, and the air smelled of gunpowder and fear. In the middle of the ranch lands stood a wooden post, and to it a young woman was bound, her wrists torn raw by rope that refused mercy. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with a quiet terror that words could barely hold. The dry wind rattled loose boards and whispered secrets of violence, but it was her trembling voice that broke the stillness. Just a few feet away, a lone rancher stood, boots pressed into the dirt, knife gripped tight, his chest rising like a man at war with himself. His gaze locked on her, yet his breath faltered, for every instinct told him this was no rescue. It was a warning carved into silence. The knife slid through the rope, and the strands fell to the dirt like dead snakes. But the girl did not move, her body trembling as if freedom itself was too heavy to carry, her lips parting only to release a broken whisper that cut colder than the desert wind. "I'm just bait." The words struck the rancher harder than any bullet could, freezing his breath, making his hand stiffen as though he had just sealed his own fate. His eyes searched hers for a lie, for a sign of trickery, but what he found instead was a hollow truth buried deep in her gaze, a warning carved into fear. And before his thoughts could steady, the silence around them shifted. From the canyon walls, shadows seemed to stir, dark shapes sliding with the patience of predators, and the stillness of the air thickened until even the dust refused to rise. The rancher's pulse hammered inside his chest, the sound echoing in his skull louder than the howl of any coyote, and he knew in that instant that the woman before him was not the prize, but the lure, placed here by unseen hands who watched from above, their eyes cold, their rifles ready. She lowered her head, strands of hair falling across her face, her voice no stronger than a ghost, but sharp enough to pierce him again. "They want you, not me." Every muscle in his body screamed for movement. Yet his boots felt anchored to the earth, as though the soil itself held him down, unwilling to let him flee. He wanted to ask who. He wanted to demand answers, but his throat closed tight, and all he could hear was the slow grinding of metal, the unmistakable click of a rifle chamber hidden somewhere in the rocks. The girl's shoulders shook, her hands finally falling free from the loosened rope. But she did not run. She did not beg. She only stared at him with an expression that was part sorrow, part warning, and entirely hopeless, as though she had seen men stand in this very place before, men who had not lived to speak of it. The rancher's eyes darted to the ridges, his grip tightening on the knife, his mind racing through the math of distance and cover. But the canyon stretched wide, the sun bleeding into the cliffs, and every shadow looked like a barrel pointed straight at his chest. He swallowed hard, his throat burning dry, and for the first time in years he felt powerless, not because of the girl, not because of the ropes, but because somewhere in that dust and stone, death was watching, patient and precise. The girl raised her head slowly, her lips trembling as she whispered once more, almost like a prayer already too late to be heard. "You should have left me." The girl's whisper still lingered in the air like smoke refusing to fade, and the rancher could feel its weight pressing on his chest as he stared at her wrists, the raw skin red and swollen where the rope had bitten deep, the strands now lying in the dirt like the remains of something cruel. He wanted to believe he had done the right thing by cutting her free, yet every instinct warned him that he had walked straight into a snare carefully laid for him alone. Her eyes avoided his, shifting toward the ridges, and for a moment he wondered if she had already counted the rifles aimed at his back. The knife in his hand felt small against the thought of hidden barrels waiting in silence, and he fought the urge to drop it, to show her he meant no harm, though his heart told him kindness would not save him now. The desert stretched wide and endless, but in that instant it felt as though the walls of the canyon had closed in, trapping him in a place where choices mattered more than bullets. His mind raced. Should he trust the broken girl who looked more like a victim than a betrayer? Or should he listen to the warning in her trembling voice and accept that she was nothing but the lure to draw him here? Her lips moved as if to speak again, but no sound came, only the faint tremor of her shoulders, as though she carried shame heavy enough to crush her frame. He thought of the men he had buried, friends who had once believed a stranger's cry for help, only to fall beneath ambush fire, and he wondered if history was about to carve his name into the same cruel story. Sweat traced the lines of his jaw, his eyes scanning the stone above, waiting for the flash of steel, the glint of glass, some sign of the hunters she had warned him of. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a reminder that the desert was not silent. It was listening, waiting, hungry. He clenched his jaw, torn between stepping back into the open where he would surely die, or staying by her side where he might still hold some chance of understanding what game had been set. Her gaze finally lifted to his, and in those haunted eyes he saw no malice, no trick, only the weight of someone who had been forced into this cruel design, someone who knew the cost of hesitation. The rancher's stomach twisted as he realized the true dilemma was not whether she lied or spoke truth, but whether he had the courage to act before the hunters revealed themselves. His grip tightened on the knife, his boots shifting in the dust, every muscle coiled to choose a path, yet still he hesitated, caught in the thin line between trust and betrayal, life and death, knowing one wrong move would decide which would claim him first. The sound was faint, but in the still canyon, it was louder than thunder, the sharp, mechanical click of a rifle carried on the wind, and the rancher froze as if the noise had cut straight through his spine. His breath shallow and uneven, his eyes darting across the ridges where shadows blended with stone. The girl's lashes lowered, her eyes shutting as though she had no strength left to watch what came next, and her whisper broke against the silence with the weight of a confession already written in blood. "They'll come for you. Not me." Her words carved through him, and in that instant he understood with brutal clarity that he was standing wide in the open, his chest a mark, his body nothing more than a silhouette against the dying sun, a perfect target for unseen barrels waiting with patience sharper than any blade. His skin prickled as though dozens of eyes pressed into him from every direction, and the desert that had always felt vast now seemed like a cage built of stone and dust. He wanted to move, to dive for cover, but hesitation clung to him like iron chains, the knowledge that one wrong twitch might trigger the shot that would end him. The girl's shoulders trembled, her hands resting limp at her sides, her body a prisoner even without the ropes, and he realized she had surrendered long before he cut her free. Surrendered not to him but to the fate chosen by those who placed her here as bait. His throat tightened, sweat burning in his eyes, and he could almost hear the hunters breathing above him, waiting for fear to drive him into a mistake. Every second stretched into eternity, the silence after that single click heavier than gunfire itself. And in that crushing stillness he saw the cruelty of the trap. If he ran, he would be shot. If he stayed, he would be cornered. And either way, the girl would remain untouched, her purpose fulfilled. She turned her face slightly toward him, not opening her eyes, her lips moving once more, the words barely audible yet cutting through the weight of the desert like a blade through cloth. "It's already too late." The rancher's grip on the knife tightened until his knuckles turned white, his chest heaving as the war between instinct and reason threatened to tear him apart, and he wondered if courage meant standing tall and daring the shot, or if survival meant sinking into the dust and crawling like an animal until he found shelter. The canyon's breath grew colder, the light fading, and with every heartbeat he felt the darkness around them grow thicker, pressing against his skin, reminding him that the hunters had time on their side, and he did not. His pulse thundered louder than the desert wind, each beat shaking his chest as though his own heart was trying to break free and flee before the rest of him could decide. And he stood there with sweat rolling down his neck, tasting the salt of fear on his lips, staring at the ridges where danger crouched unseen but certain. The knife in his hand felt like a toy against rifles hidden in stone, yet dropping it would make him nothing but prey, and the thought twisted through his skull until his vision blurred. The girl did not move, her face pale, her shoulders slumped, as though she had already accepted what was coming. And that made his dilemma even heavier, because every path before him seemed cursed. Should he run, trusting his legs to carry him faster than bullets, knowing the wide-open earth would expose him? Should he fight, raising a blade against guns he could not see, gambling on courage against steel and powder? Or should he stay by her side, refusing to leave her to the hunters who had used her as bait, even if it meant his own death? The choices circled in his mind, each one louder than the last, and still the canyon gave him no answer, only silence broken by the faint scrape of stone above, a sound that told him the watchers were shifting, adjusting, waiting for him to make his move. His throat burned dry, every swallow painful, and he thought of his past battles, moments when instinct had saved him before. Yet this trap was unlike any he had faced, because here hesitation was not weakness, it was a sentence. His boots shifted in the dust, his body screaming to move, to choose, to act before the waiting rifles did. But his soul rebelled against abandoning her, against running like a coward, even though the cold logic in his mind whispered that survival might demand it. He looked at her again, at the tremble of her lips, the weight in her eyes even though they stayed closed, and he understood that whatever choice he made would carve itself into him forever, that there would be no peace if he chose wrong. The wind carried another faint metallic click, sharper this time, and it felt like the desert itself was counting down, daring him to step into his fate. He raised his chin slightly, his jaw tight, his grip on the knife so hard his hand ached, and he knew that every second of waiting only fed the hunter's patience. Every breath he delayed only gave them time to draw tighter around him. His heartbeat surged like a drum calling for war, and in that desperate moment he realized that choice itself was the trap, that no matter what path he took, the desert had already marked him. The dust lifted in a heavy wave as the horizon shifted and dark figures emerged, riders on horseback cutting through the dying light with rifles gleaming in their hands, and the rancher's chest clenched as he turned instinctively to shield her, his body a wall between her fragile frame and the storm descending upon them. His eyes widened with the cruel truth, for she had spoken no lie. She had been nothing but bait, a trembling soul forced into silence, so that men with iron in their hands could draw him into their snare. The ground shook under the weight of hooves, the sky swallowing its own light as shadows closed in, and still he did not step aside, though terror wrapped around him like chains. She opened her eyes at last, tears breaking free, her whisper carried by the wind like a prayer already too late, and the riders closed the circle, the trap complete, leaving the desert to decide what price would be paid before nightfall.